Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Words of Heart podcast. I am your host, Dion Sanchez, and joining me in this particular episode is Charlene Jones. Did I announce that right? I wasn't sure which last name you went by, considering our email exchange.
Oh, my last name is Jones. You're referring to my son's name. That's fine. My last name is Jones.
Good to know. Either way, thank you for joining me, Charlene. This is a real pleasure.
Dion, thank you for this opportunity. I certainly enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts with other guests and your lighthearted manner and your conversational approach. So I look forward to the next short but lovely time together.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's kick off that loveliness. If you could tell my audience a bit about yourself, your book, and whatever pops into your head to kick things off, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, my memoir, which has won some awards, is called My Impossible Life, and it's up for sale on Amazon. And the subtitle is Trauma, Travel, and Transcendence. So when I was 16, I was running away from home for a whole lot of other reasons that get covered in the book. And I got into a car driven by two armed robbers, and they held me hostage for 3 days. So, of course, coming out of that was PTSD. And I have no argument with the dark side. I enjoyed, to the extent I was capable of enjoying, I was okay in the dark side of life, staying up all day, all night, sleeping all day, not working, just being generally not capable of functioning very well. And I met a meditation teacher, wonderful healer, and a very contentious and difficult human being. His Western name was Leslie George Dawson, and his Eastern name was Karmaten Singh Dorje Namjal Rinpoche. And that's a handful. So I used to call him Sir. So I traveled with him, and I learned a tremendous amount about healing, both Eastern practices and Western. So, for example, I was in a Tibetan temple in the north of India when I was 20 years old. Pure accident, pure fluke, pure universe taking care of this poor little ragamuffin over here who barely deserved it. So I can't claim any glory or any ability on my part. It was just a great generosity of life. I was initiated into the secret initiations of the Tibetan Buddhists at that time, in a temple by His Holiness the Sakyapa in Dehradun, India. There were about 100 of us in that particular experience. And then about 30 of us went to New Zealand and did intensive meditation retreat. So when I was 21, I did a 3-month total silent meditation retreat, which was really powerful and very helpful. Then I began traveling. For 7 years, I both worked in Toronto and then traveled whenever I could with this teacher. My teacher, and I learned a lot. He taught a lot about Western methods as well as Eastern. So we learned body de-armoring, called bioenergetics. We learned about breath. We learned about communication. We learned about art therapy. This was all prior, 1971, 1972, prior to the explosions that we now have. But what I had come to understand is that I had a sort of single focus, and that was first to heal myself and then to help others. And that became the outshoot of that experience, which I didn't remember, by the way, for 15 years. It crept up on me suddenly. And there's two questions you might ask yourself. How did I escape? Because they had shotguns and had no intention of letting me go. How did I do that? And then the second one is, what did I do with the experience once I knew how bad it had been? Because that took a certain amount of energy for it to come through. It came through when I was in university raising my son, and I have a double master's degree. I've been a performance poet. I published books. And gradually, as time has gone on, I've realized that I live a life that is so gifted and so blessed in so many ways. And I'm so grateful for all the ways in which I've been given an extraordinary abundance. And my interest continues to be, although my son's now married and I'm a grandmother and life has gone on, I continue to be deeply interested in healing. And so I've come to the very most favorite thing I have recently to talk about, which is called havening. So you haven't heard about havening, have you, Dion?
I have not.
All right. I'm going to turn all your listeners over to havening.org. That's with a capital H, havening.org. This process was developed by a man named Dr. Ronald Rudin. He's an intern I think I don't know if he's still working as an internist, but that was his practice. He had one of the largest medical clinics in New York City. He and his brother, Stephen Rudin, spent nearly 20 years discovering how our brains encode trauma. Okay, so how it actually chemically and electronically encodes trauma. And there's a way in which it encodes trauma. The brain will just keep certain things on alert. They're just like, I'm going to do this very, very simply. I love the science behind it, but for our short time together, I think I should go very, very simply. So the idea is that once you've had a trauma, that part of your brain stays on alert, as though there's these little sentinels running up and down saying, look out, look out, look out. So the more trauma you've had, the less you're able to actually fully relax. And we know that about PTSD. And traumatized individuals, one of their challenges is learning to feel safe enough to let go. This process in half an hour, half an hour, this process will release a trauma or a layer of trauma so that your sentinels are no longer on guard for that particular experience. What that means for what Dr. Rudin calls the landscape of your psyche is that you've now got one part of your landscape healed, and that helps everything. The vibrational energy goes through, it's electronic, it goes through, your brain is healthier, you have more resilience, you can feel better in your life. I've had the most amazing responses from people. I have worked as a therapist for 25 years. It took me 30 years, Dion, of hard work to get to where I knew that I was clear of those experiences that happened. I was raped, tied to a chair, tortured. I don't talk about it too deeply because it hurts other people. It doesn't bother me in the least. I'm happy to talk about it. But it took me 30 years. And for 25 of those years when I was working with others, I kept thinking, how can I tell people, yeah, you can heal, but it takes a long time and a lot of effort. Right. This package happens in half an hour and it's easy. You don't go down and stay down. You go down into the memory for like 10 seconds. You give me a little figure between 0 and 10 on what your subjective distress is, where we like to have things 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we start doing these incredible little games. We play these things with our heads. We just keep the cognitive mind operative in a very fun way, and Dr. Rudin himself will say that the protocol is actually trivial. It's just playing. But what happens is, instead of you then meditating on or cogitating or reflecting on the difficult memory, you called it up and something called depotentiation takes place, which is now you've called it up and you've been distracted. You've allowed yourself to let go. And as you've done that, as you've been distracted, the emotional link to that bad memory is gone. So you have the memory, but you don't have a whole emotional response to it at all. Right? Now, I'll give you an example. I've been allowed to say this, that I had a young woman, middle-aged woman, who had a very bad experience in Jamaica and had been threatened. Her life had been threatened while she was in the hotel, in the patio, in the enclosure right on the beach, and her life was threatened. We did 10 minutes of this. And she said, for the first time, I can think about that memory. It doesn't bother me. I'm not getting bad rushes in my stomach. She said, I've got the memory of the beach, but the person is gone. The person who was doing the threatening is gone. Just gone. The memory just goes, yeah, we don't need that part. I mean, you know what happens. You still know the narrative. It's not like you're wiping out your memory. You just don't have any emotional connection to it. So people will report various things like the memory is foggy, which is like, again, you don't need it to be crystal clear. You don't want it to be. I have people say to me, I'm not going to think about that anymore. Back fast. Like, I don't have to, it's gone. So I'm now a certified havening practitioner. And I tell you, Dion, for the first time, I feel like I can really offer people something. Another thing about havening that is really radical, revolutionary, and works is that if you work with me for 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 sessions, whatever it may be, I'm talking sessions. I'm not talking months. I'm not talking years. I'm talking sessions. You can then do self-havening on your own. So you don't need me after a while. This is sort of, I should hang on to the old fashioned way so I can get you coming back all the time, but I'm really interested in people healing. And so getting you up and on your own and out of the way of and feeling strong, that's my greatest pleasure.
Awesome. And I truly admire you for using havening, I hope I said that right, to help people heal from their pain. Considering what your memoir is about, if you don't mind me asking, what
Sure.
inspired you to write about your memoir? Considering everything you went through and having to revisit it and put it on paper.
That's a really good question. Thank you, Dion. And I appreciate you pointing in that direction. I had always identified as a writer. I was writing poetry from when I was 6 years old. So part of my identity was as a writer. When I got back from those 3 days, the only way I could really, and I was only talking about good things, I didn't remember any of the horror,
Right.
but I knew that I had an unusually powerful story to tell. And I have the papers that I attempted when I was 17. I attempted to type it all down. We had typewriters in those days. I attempted to type the original story down. And I couldn't, I didn't have access to the other memories. And I knew that I just knew that wasn't right. Somehow it wasn't right. It didn't feel right. So I have the original. I tried for 50 years to write this story. And I didn't do it all the time. There were decades when I didn't do it at all, but I had done one complete version in 1993, which completely didn't go anywhere. I wasn't able to get out in the world. And good reason for it wasn't the right book. Finally, when I had done enough healing, I was able to tell the story. And I was able to tell it from a point of view of, I think, a darkness, but a balance within the darkness. And it ends on a very positive note because I had a vision of what happens to those of us who've had that kind of trauma, and maybe other people as well. That there's this great wave of humanity where for millennia, we have just accepted child abuse and rape and torturing each other as just, well, that's just the price of war. It's only recently in the last 10 or 15 years that's even become a question in the UN. You're not supposed to rape women now when there's war, but they still do. People still do, men still do. So you have to realize how quickly we are trying to turn this huge tidal wave of history where we all accepted it, including the women. Hush up. That's what happens to us all. Just stop it. It's okay. Keep moving. Not okay. We got ways to heal it now. And those of us who are doing that, it's just like me. I'm just like this tiny drop on that huge tsunami. I'm just a tiny drop of offering to the world. This is what I can offer to try to help people. And I feel really humbled and really awed and really honored to be able to do that.
Awesome. And I truly love your analogy of a tsunami, which is a really powerful storm and has the potential to do all types of effects to us. And in regards to storms and the chaos that can come from a storm, if you don't mind sharing your thoughts or perspective on the current storm that our world is experiencing,
Yes.
as the pandemic, do you find people relying on Haven or seeking any form of therapy during this season, considering what's going on?
I think there's been a marked rise in people who are suffering from anxiety, children, for example, naturally, a marked rise in the numbers of people who are suffering. Yes. Excuse me. I think that it's like almost like other things in life where, okay, we have a choice here for how to handle it. If we take this as not a great opportunity, but an opportunity to let go of some of the extraneous busy, drive. I've heard at least two people say, therapists, right? And one of them very well known, prior to the pandemic, they were in airplanes all the time. Well, that's not good for the human body. I'm sorry, we just don't have the kind of air travel that promotes health in your body. It's very rigorously difficult. I don't know if I said that correctly, but it's bad for you, is my point of view. And I could be wrong, but the busyness of life has been brought to a halt. And both these people said it was great to not have to do that anymore for this period of time, to just sit still. Now I feel very bad. I was separated from my family for the first year and a half. I was able to visit them in the fall. We visited several times because we could do that. And now with Omicron, we're in a little different situation again. I think the thing to remember is history. Not enough people know our history, the history of the planet. In 1918, there was a pandemic. There was a flu called the Spanish flu that took out 50 million people. 50 million people died from Spanish flu. There was a flu in 1968 called the Hong Kong flu. And I remember that because I was like 16 years old. And I remember my father talking about it. And we didn't have worldwide communication. So it's called the Hong Kong flu. And we just kept going. 3 to 4 million people worldwide died of it. And I might not have exact stats, but I know that those are close. Both those figures are close. Pandemics have been with us since the onset of the bubonic plague in 1358. Some people say 1353. The readings I've done is 1358. In Europe, the fleas on the back of the rats from the ships that were coming and traveling, and we didn't know it, and bubonic plague. And bubonic plague kept coming. It kept coming cyclically every 100 years or so. Once the first wash had gone through Europe and knocked out so many people, that in those days there was no penicillin, there were no hospitals that could put you on a ventilator. And in fact, with bubonic plague, because I've studied a little bit about plagues, I'm a very strange person, and I found it very interesting to study. You die in 3 days. You have to have medical intervention and antibiotics within 3 days, or you die. That's bubonic plague. So when I first heard of COVID and how there was a very good chance that you wouldn't die from it, I thought, okay, this isn't bubonic plague. What is it that we're really worried about? We're really worried about hospitalizations. We're really worried about frontline workers, nurses, doctors, ambulance drivers, right? All the people who have to be working to help other people all the time. We're worried about them burning out. We're worried that there's not enough ventilators. And yes, there was a point during the earlier part of the COVID when in Toronto, for example, we were concerned in Ontario because we had something like 800 people in the ICU units, and we only have 1,000 plus ICU units. And so it was considered very dangerous and very rigorous. And it meant that all of the staff had to then focus on ICU units. I used to teach nurses ICU units, the critical units, as well as do emergency, as well as do the regular rounds, as well as do whatever happens in triage and admitting and so forth. So the real problem is we don't have enough healthcare workers, and we don't have enough hospitalizations to guarantee that everybody can get exactly what they need. And the very tragic news, of course, is that the virus did affect people who are elderly, like really elderly. I'm elderly, I'm 70. So, 85 or something, 80. We always push it, humans. So it's like, well, I'm not really old. Other people are old. I'm not really old. It's just, you have to kind of play that a little bit in your brain. Helps. And the other thing is people who have pre-existing conditions. And so there's a great sympathy and a great empathy and compassion for the people who've been lost. And the numbers are huge. There's no question. Numbers are huge of the people who were lost in America and around the world. Tragic. It's part of how this planet works. Look at the history. If we don't have a history prior to 1353, it's probably because we just didn't keep the records. But my guess is there were pandemics prior to 1353, because if you keep looking at it, you see that those cyclically, we get pandemics. And the more we travel, the more we're going to have a certain amount of that. The good news is we are learning how to combat, and what are the antidotes that we need in order to keep the pandemics from wiping out more and more people. And one of the things that we have to look straight in the face is guard your health. Everybody, guard your health like the precious, precious jewel that it is. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. It doesn't matter what kind of money or status or power or anything like that. But if you have your health, physical health, and you can be happy in the day that you have, the day that we have right now, work toward that feeling of well-being in the day that you have right now, grateful for all the things that we have. Because the other thing is, we are in the Western world. We're in the top economic strata of the planet. And there's a lot of people who didn't get the opportunities through the pandemic that we did. Like most people on the planet did not get boosters, still are not getting boosters, don't have hospitals properly to go to, we have to look at that honestly and say, what world do we want to live in? How can we shift it? How can we change? To learn. So two things: to learn from the history of this experience and to learn from where we want to go from here. How do we want to shape our world from here? And what can I do as an individual to help out?
Absolutely. And yay, my internet's acting up. I hope you're still there with me, Charlene.
I'm
As
still there.
good. As I was gonna say, is I completely understand and agree with how important our health is and making it a top priority. I don't know what that was. Making it a top priority. Earlier in the pandemic, I made like a Facebook status to those who may have been taking it lightly or think, oh, my body's immune to this, or it's not going to affect me. Oh, I'm going to go to the club. It's not going to be a big deal, but it is a big deal. And the reason I made that Facebook status in regards to my own health, because at the start of the pandemic in January 2020, I actually got diagnosed with diabetes.
I'm
So
sorry to hear that, dear.
yeah. Thank you. And so as far as health in your body, I understand it fairly well.
Yeah.
Because before I had diagnosed, my body was on a downward spiral into non-existence, or it's not existing, period. And I can't emphasize how devastating and terrifying that sheer fact was. That just the fact that I could just be dust at any given moment. So, and before I got sick and everything, I didn't take much note of my body. I didn't give it vegetables or lettuce. I gave it cheeseburgers and perhaps popcorn at 2 a.m. in the morning. I just walked and drank water. I didn't really do anything for my body. And then poof, my body decided to work against me before I know it, and I could have died. But I'm still here, and my diagnosis is a blessing in itself. And I got to live out the rest of 2020, which was a really unlikely reality that I wasn't going to be able to live it out. So when people take this lightly, like, oh, my body is capable of anything, you really don't know what your body is capable of. I certainly didn't. And luckily, I'm still here. I took what happened to me as a blessing and took more importance on what I put in my body in order to live and continue living, and sharing your story and other people's story through my platform, which if I hadn't been diagnosed, obviously I wouldn't have been able to launch this podcast like I anticipated on doing. So people really do need to take this more seriously than they should. Yes, we have the vaccine and the booster shots. And everyone's welcome to their own opinion and their prerogative. I'm not saying you don't have a right to do whatever you want with your body, but I would like people to be more open-minded and absorb all the knowledge and the reality that we have the luxury of keep on living, and others don't. And I'm glad you shared that, because people don't understand that. People don't have access to this, and I forget that sometimes. So I'm glad you shared that we do need to put our health first and foremost, and to take into account that other people don't have access. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been affected by this pandemic, truly.
Absolutely. My heart also. And, it isn't about you not having your rights. It's about you understanding the laws of how the body works.
Right.
So if you're going to give your body nothing but carbohydrates and sugar, white sugar, the law is you're going to die soon. You're going to die sooner. If you're going to be like, I know people who have been musicians lifelong, very hard life, but they exacerbate it they make it worse by partying all night, drinking too much alcohol, running around and not resting enough. There's just certain things that you can't do unless you want to reap the rewards of that. It's not about your right as an individual. It's your right as an individual. If you want to run your body down, go ahead. Nobody's going to stop you, but it's common sense. It says, be reasonable 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time go and have a good carbohydrate meal and you drink what you want and whatever. It doesn't have to be 100% strict and so forth, but 80% of the time, your body needs vegetables, your body needs proper carbohydrates, your body needs a good diet, your body needs rest and proper hydration. And your mind needs to have a foresight of gratitude for the opportunities you've been given. So rather than becoming sort of all knotted up as a fist trying to defend a right that isn't really a right, it's not about what is in the Constitution. This is about what the body will actually do or not do. And we have enough statistics now to know. And I'm just grateful to you that you turned this around. You created out of the difficulty and out of the obstacle that was handed to you. And we all have obstacles and challenges. Now, my story is by far the same as is so familiar to so many people, unfortunately. But the good news is you take whatever the obstacle is and you turn it to being something that you can grow from. And that's how you get through in life. I think that's from an old person to a younger person, Dion.
No, it applies to all ages. Absolutely.
I think so.
So on to my favorite part, which you already know. I can't believe you did your research, which I find really cool. Is the icebreaker segment. So I think you already know what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna start with the icebreaker question. Hopefully you didn't think, I don't know. I just find it hysterical that you actually listened to it, but I also find it really sweet because now this game isn't as much of a surprise to you.
Yeah.
So the icebreaker question is, if you had to come up with a title or a chapter for where your life is at right now, what would it be?
Transcendent blessing.
Transcendent blessing.
Yep.
Do you mind sharing a little bit as to what made you think of that particular title?
I live on a small lake. I have my own podcast. It's on Soul Sciences, www.soulsciences.net. I have 3 beautiful, healthy grandchildren who are being raised in a way that I adore. They are being given proper boundaries, and yet they are loved and loved and loved. My son and my daughter-in-law are healthy, and I love them to the ends of the moon and back, and they welcome me into their home 2, 3, 4 times a year. I have a partner. I have opportunities that I'm still taking advantage of. I have my health. I do yoga regularly. I meditate. I've been meditating all my life. And I'm able to help other people sometimes. Sometimes I actually can see that whatever efforts I've made are helping someone else come through some of the darker parts of life. So I just feel like my life is this mix of a transcendent blessing and that I want to share. That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Awesome. And that's just such a beautiful title, Transcendent Blessing, because you, from talking, you just have such a servant heart, and I truly admire you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Dion. That's very sweet. Now you're going to make me sing, aren't you?
No, not yet. Yeah, I'm still going to do your research. I'm not going to make you sing quite yet.
Okay.
This will be the part where I share my title, which you kind of already know, but I'm still going to say it. Is to be my title or chapter for my life at this precise moment would be a warrior for change. I've undergone a lot in my life, not just with becoming diabetic in the pandemic, which again, my heart goes out to anyone who was diagnosed with anything during this pandemic. Having to be diagnosed brings its own onset of fears, but when you add a virus which had no solution at the time, just is a whole new can of worms. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been diagnosed or again truly been affected by the pandemic in some way. But back to my question, a warrior for change really symbolizes who I am and where I am. I undergone a lot, as I just mentioned, and that's not just with diabetes, that's from day one to now. I've undergone a myriad of health-related issues and problems from the jump. So it just really symbolizes and reflects who I am and what I face and overcome and what I'll continue to face from now to this point forward. So.
And I love that you're sharing this so beautifully on your podcast, Dion. It's just so generous of your heart to take your struggles and your suffering and turn it into something that's composite. It's a compost for the rest of the world. And to call yourself a warrior for change, I love that. I love that. You really are a warrior. It's wonderful.
Thank you. So on to the part that you already know is coming. I'm laughing because you already know. So on to the icebreaker game. I might have to change one of the words because you already know what the words are.
Sure.
Um, Either way, the icebreaker game is called Song Association. You don't have to be an avid singer. You could be a shower singer or yodeler or whistler, although I don't understand how you can yodel or whistle any of these words. If you are listening and you know how to whistle or yodel these songs, let me know and I will have you on my podcast because that would be really, really cool. Anyhow, how the game works, which you kind of already know already, is I give you a word and you can either sing it, rap it, yodel it. It can either be in the song title or in the lyrics. It has to be an actual song. If you're like my last guest who decided to change up the game by singing actual songs and then changing the lyrics to pertain the word, then that's not gonna work. Although shout out to Hollywood Capone who changed up my game last time. That was still cool either way. But again, it has to be an actual song.
Okay.
So yes. Oh, and it can't be the name of an artist. There are words that have artists' name like Faith Hill or Popcorn Jumble or whatever. It has to be an actual song, no artist related word names. So of course, you already know how many seconds you have. You have 15 seconds from the time I give you the word to sing it, rap it, yodel it from either in the title or in the lyrics. I am, however, since you did your research already, I'm going to change the last word, which I just thought of it, and it is a song, and it is the holiday season, so it shouldn't be that hard to figure out a song for it. So I'm going to give you the first word, and that is heart.
You gotta have heart, miles and miles and miles of heart. Oh, it's fun to be a genius, of course, but place that old horse before the cart. I just went off key, but that's a song from the 1950s or 40s. I've always liked that song.
Wow, you did that beautifully. And you were worried about singing. You did great. So the next word
Fully
is
transparent. I love to sing. I sing all the time.
that's the joys of this game. So
Got
the
it.
next word is words.
Smile, an everlasting smile. A smile can bring you near to me. Don't ever see you cry, 'cause that would bring a tear to me.
Why can I can't see?
These words have lost their glory. Let's find a brand new story now, my love. Right now, there'll be no something, something, and I can show you how, my love. Talk and everlasting words. There you go.
That was beautiful. It was the timer already went off, though, but it was still
Yeah,
lovely.
I went off. I went on my own little tune there for a while.
It was still lovely. So the last word, which I just changed because you did your research, and I'm sure it's gonna stump you, but not stump you too hard. So the last word is dun, 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 is silent.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child. You better stop me because I'll keep going.
I was hoping you would do that song, and also it's my favorite Christmas song ever.
That's so sweet.
Plus, considering you mentioned silent meditation, it was the perfect word.
Perfect
to
word.
stump you a little bit because the last word you already knew. So, well, we can keep singing all day long because that is an absolute favorite of mine, of course. But unfortunately, we're at the end of this winding singing road. If you have any links or social media, is your book going to turn into a movie at some point on the moon?
Yeah, I'd love for someone to pick it up and make a movie. It'd be a great movie. But in the meantime, you can go to Amazon and get My Impossible Life, the award-winning book, Charlene Jones. And you could also get Medicine Buddha, Medicine Mind, which is also up on Amazon. I have a blog page. Mostly it's from my website, www.soulsciences, soulsciences.net. It's .net. And there you can find my podcasts, and I'm putting up information about havening, and listen to anybody. If you really, really want to just feel better in a minute, just start singing. Doesn't matter how good you doesn't matter how good you are or not good. Just start singing. We know from neuroscience that changes your brain and it makes you feel a whole lot better about everything. So it's one of the secrets that I use for healing. So now everybody can use it.
Yes, go ahead and sing your little heart out. Thank you so much, Charlene, for this wonderful conversation. Truly, it was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Dion, for all this that you're doing for everyone else, and best to you in the coming year, dear. Take very good care.
Thank you. Thank you to all my listeners. This is the end of this latest episode of the Words of Fire podcast. If you enjoyed it, if it resonated with your singing heart, here is the ways to listen to it on the following platforms. You can find us on Facebook at the Words of Fire podcast. We're also on YouTube under the same name, and wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and Google. Again, don't hesitate to let me know how this episode resonated with you, or any episode for that matter. Subscribe, retweet, leave a rating or review. If you are listening to it from the moon, please let me know, because I still find that to be really, really cool. Intergalactic broadcasting. But until then, here's all of us from planet Earth here. Again, thank you for joining me, Charlene Jones. Again, I am your host. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until next time, bye.